Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Her Side of the Ruck, proudly sponsored by Hook and Flanker. I'm Tash,
I'm Bernice.
and we're not pundits.
We're just two women who know what a ruck is.
Well, the men's Six Nations did not disappoint, and we've taken a little bit of time just to let the air breathe, I suppose, before we offer some of our tournament reflections. But this episode is going to focus on what we learnt from the men's Six Nations 2026. And I think we learned a lot about the six countries participating in the competition. Thank you so much for joining us and watching another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. If you're new to the channel, please hit the like button and subscribe too. It's great to have you with us. So let's get into this episode. What did we learn about the men's Six Nations? Let's start off with some general comments. Bernice, what were your thoughts as a South African? What did we learn from this year's campaign?
I have to say, I think this was definitely one of the best Six Nations that I've ever watched. And I know you'll probably feel a little bit different, seeing how we predicted the Six Nations to turn out versus how it actually turned out. But I genuinely think as a neutral, it was so enjoyable. Every week was almost unpredictable. It didn't go as, you've kind of expected. And I really, really enjoyed the Six Nations. I think to me, things really summed up the Six Nations. And I think one would be game management. And we'll obviously dive a little bit deeper into each of these aspects as we, speak about each team. But I think
Mm.
game management was something that was really big. And for France, Scotland, Ireland, and even Wales, Italy, like for every team, they had moments where, game management was the key to their success or the key to their downfall. And then I think identity, like really playing to your strengths or finding your identity. We've seen teams that haven't really, found their feet, don't really know, what sort of game they want to play or where they're headed towards. So I think knowing your identity or knowing where your strengths lie is such an important thing for each of the teams and something that we've seen was also a success and a downfall.
For me, in general, I think something that really stood out for me was how international rugby has evolved in its style.
Hmm.
Because I think how we saw a lot of the European teams play was with expansion. And yes, there were breaks from the forwards and there were some classic, like short phase, short range tries. However, when we look at the success of, and you look at the score lines too, a lot of these games were not won by defense, they were won by attack. It was definitely a tournament for the wingers as well. Like Louis Biel Barre scored in every single match. Atasogbe was also fantastic for France on the wing. Darcy Graham and Kyle Steyn were fabulous for Scotland. I think Henry Arundel had a mixed bag in terms of his time with England, but the tries that he scored, getting a hat trick in a Six Nations game, even if it was against Wales in the first round, when Wales have been an improving team in this competition but weren't great at the start, I think is still a phenomenal achievement, and you can't take that away from him. Even when I think about Tommy Freeman, he's traditionally a winger but moved into the centres, but his skill set I think was very important for when England did score and where they were on the attacking front. So for me, this was definitely a tournament for the wingers in terms of all round. I genuinely think European men's rugby is in a good spot. Now, from a personal point of view, yeah, it's a bit rubbish that England did not step up to the platform that they kind of went into this tournament with. However, everyone's beaten everybody. And that makes European men's rugby incredibly exciting rather than having one team just being so dominant. The Nations Cup in the summer will be incredibly interesting of how these teams use the Six Nations going forward to face the Southern Hemisphere teams. I also think the age of the static prop is over. We've now got an era of modern day props. Like for me, the two standouts are Reece Carey and Joe Hayes. I was really impressed with how mobile Carey was, particularly with that try, which we spoke about on the pod quite a lot in one of our episodes. And maybe I'm biased because Hazy's a Tigers guy, but I think at one point he was on the fringes of getting into England and was struggling with his scrummaging, as now his scrummaging is excellent. The three shirt is his. And he's also very mobile around the park and is just very good with his work rate at the breakdown too. Drilling the intercept. The Kyle Steyn try against France comes from the intercept. one of Ollie Chesham's tries against France. I just said the same about Carl Stein. He got an intercept try, was his second try. And Ollie Chesham also got an intercept try against France. Teams are drilling the intercept ball. And it was interesting because I went to the Prem Cup final at the weekend, and Billy Searle, who is fly half for Leicester Tigers, he also scored an intercept try. So I think club and country are drilling this, and we are seeing this play out on the international stage. I think we will see a game of rugby that becomes a lot quicker rather than attempting to slow teams down. And I think the high score lines just reflect the trend towards attack rather than we'll attack a little bit, but we're just going to be ruthless in defense. I think the motto going forward is attack, attack, attack.
Something that we've also seen and something that you've mentioned was like a few inexperienced players or a few young players actually getting an opportunity in the main Six Nations. And I think squad depth is also something that we've seen like how important it is in the Six Nations. Even if it is bringing in one or two inexperienced players, or even if it is, giving a whole bunch of inexperienced players an opportunity, you'll never know what they'll be able to do in a game unless you put them in test rugby. And that's the only
Mm,
way that you'll be able to measure whether they'll be able to make the step up or not. So I think in terms of injuries, in terms of going forward, in terms of building towards the World Cup, like these things are important. And that's something that I really enjoyed seeing from most of the teams is actually including a few young players in their team. Some of it were forced, obviously due to injury. Some of it were deliberate in terms of what they want to achieve within the next few months. But I have to agree with you on the Nations Cup. I think it couldn't have come at a better time, and I'm really excited for it, especially seeing, how good Scotland has been performing and, kind of it will be interesting to see how England will regroup ahead of the
yes.
Nations Cup and what they'll bring to it. So yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Amazing. I think it's been a phenomenal tournament overall. And we'll move on to talking about what we learn. I think country by country, we'll start in chronological order with the winners first. France. Allez le bleu, I guess.
Oh,
That I will say the final game was incredibly exciting, and I was proud of England's performance in
yeah.
how they bounced back
Mhm.
within a 6, 7 day period. So as an England supporter, I'll take that away. But France just had the edge, and shall we just start with Thomas Ramos? He is the definition of a clutch player
Yeah, I think that kick is a kick that will be spoken about like long,
till the end
like
of
ahead of
time.
time. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I just remember watching the kick and I was like, oh, Tash must feel horrible at the moment and must be feeling so many emotions
I knew as
because I
soon as he
feel,
went to kick it, I was like, he's going to slot it because he doesn't
oh,
miss.
oh no. And it's so bad because as like obviously as a neutral, those are the type of matches that you just love to watch. Like
Yeah.
that is what rugby is all about. But if you if you support either of those teams, it's stressful. But
Mm,
I genuinely thought that England really stepped up in that match, and that's the type of rugby that we wanted to see the whole tournament. And I think a lot of England fans went, where was this team all along? But
yep.
we did also mention, I know we're actually talking about France now, but we did mention on the pod, England don't really have anything to lose at the minute. And I think that's exactly why they played such attacking rugby and,
Mm,
it was a very high scoring game. But I just think France was so consistent throughout the whole tournament. Yes, they had ill discipline at times, or they made silly errors when they were under pressure and everything. And that's something that they'll need to work on going forward because I think Scotland exploited that really well. And if they do
yes.
get teams that do exploit that, then you could see that they were kind of frustrated or Scotland upset them in the first few minutes of the match. So that's definitely something that France will have to work on. But in terms of overall consistency, I thought France was outstanding throughout the tournament. And just in terms of key players also performing well consistently, like
Mm.
Thomas Ramos, like Biel, they just stepped up to the big stage. But yeah, I thought France had a tremendous tournament and they are very well deserved winners of the main Six Nations.
They are. I hate to say that, but they are. And even when they lost to Scotland, they got 40 points. Like they only lost by 10
Crazy.
points. And I actually think that scoreline kind of reflects poorly on Scotland's defence in that final 20 minutes. But Scotland did a great job of creating a blueprint of how to beat France. And I think England did magpie that slightly in the final round. I want to comment on Sean Edwards because wherever he goes, silverware seems to follow. The Six Nations released an article earlier this week, and Sam Warburton, who was in the obviously ex-Welsh, British and Irish line player, now pundit, broadcaster, he described Edwards as the emotional heartbeat during the success and the peak success of Wales. And since 2008, Edwards has been involved in 18 consecutive Six Nations campaigns, four of which were Grand Slams with Wales, and two of which have been wins with France. And Edwards, because he's English speaking, gets rolled out quite a lot to do a lot of pre-match, post-match interviews during the Men's Six Nations. This guy is quality, and I think I don't know if he goes under the radar in the world of rugby. I don't think people realise like how good a coach he is. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next few years, if it depends if he wants it as an individual, whether he becomes a head coach of a top quality club team in the Prem or the URC, or becomes a head coach for a national team. Because if he can achieve this in the capacity that he's already been in, imagine what he could potentially achieve as a head coach. I think when you've got him on your side, you have a winning side. Louis Biel-Barré is a guaranteed try scorer. I think we know that for a fact. I think everyone in the rugby world knows that for a fact. He had 9 tries in this competition, and I'm pretty sure he scored in every single one of his international matches, something like 20 in a row or something. It's absolutely crazy. So I think going forward, teams should learn that you know what France are going to do. They're going to get the ball out to Louis Biel-Barré, and if he's fit to play, he will always play because he's what 20, 21 years old. He's like a cheetah, and he scores tries left, right, and centre, and has the confidence to back himself. I do think that France had a good game plan. The things that maybe we doubted about Galtier's selection at the top of the tournament, we our opinions were changed throughout as a result of the performances that France put up. And I think we can both say we were very impressed with how they conducted themselves in this competition. Moving on to the runners up. And for me, Ireland were kind of like dark horses in this competition because they had quite a poor start against France. France kind of destroyed them in the opening 60 minutes on that Thursday night fixture to open up the Men's Six Nations. But I think it goes back to how good a coach Andy Farrell is, how he addressed the elephant in the room, and he'd spoken about it in the press, and it suited his coaching style. Though for some coaches, if they spoke in the way that Andy Farrell spoke about his playing team and the issues that they faced as a result of that game, it probably would have landed very well with the playing group. But you have to tailor your approach depending on what type of coach you are and depending on what type of playing group you have. But he addressed the elephant in the room, and Ireland turned it around, and they turned it around pretty convincingly too. It shows a lot about the experience in that team, whilst I still hold the opinion that Ireland are an ageing squad, and there are plenty of players where I will be surprised if they reach this World Cup cycle. But there have been other players who could be described as aging, who had the performances of their lives, and one of them is James Gibson Park. I thought he was absolutely phenomenal in this competition. So there were some other players that stood out for me, Stuart McCluskey being one of them. He really shone in the green jersey, six try assists, 20 defenders beaten, 8 turnovers won, and 400 minutes played. So Ireland had some key playmakers in this tournament, and from where they were at point A, where they took it, to point E in the fifth round, very different place that they were in.
I think Ireland turned around their campaign completely from like the first match to the last match. And Ireland were kind of that team you never thought that they would actually have a chance to win the Six Nations. And I don't
Yeah,
mean
totally.
this in a bad way. But, if you looked at their previous games before the main Six Nations and just, kind of where they're at. We've talked about, their aging squad for the longest time on the pod, and
Yeah, we
I
have.
I still also stick with the opinion that I do think Andy Farrell needs to bring in some young blood. But
Mm,
somehow Ireland, almost won the Six Nations. It
yeah.
was up to the France-England match of, whether Ireland or France was going to win the main Six Nations. And that's also something that I really enjoyed about this tournament is Super Saturday doesn't usually come down to the wire like that. So, I mean, it was basically up until like the 82nd minute that we only knew who was going to be the champions of
Mm,
the season. So Ireland managed well to turn around their campaign. I still think that they were very inconsistent in terms of their performance. They had some great performances like their performance against England, but then they had iffy performances against Wales and Italy, which are teams that you'd expect them to win by 20 plus points. Also,
mm.
again, nothing against Italy or Wales, but just if you look at how they played against England, that's kind of what you'd expect from them against Wales and Italy as well. So they got to second place. It still feels like I don't really know how, and it might sound terrible, but that's
Do
just
you
how
know
I feel. I feel
Do you know what it reminds me of?
like
It reminds me of how Leinster started the
mm,
URC campaign this season and how they've somehow successfully breached the top four and
100%.
probably like Glasgow Warriors are above them at the minute, but Glasgow have been consistent from the beginning as Leinster started really quite poorly and also didn't play very well in the pool stages of the Investec Champions Cup, but managed to clutch it through. And that seems similar to Ireland's story in the Men's Six Nations.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary of how it kind of went for Ireland. But yeah, I think so. Andy Farrell was not able to attend to Ireland last season in the main Six Nations because of the British and Irish
Yeah.
Lions tour, if I'm not mistaken. So, he did make a difference in this season's campaign. So, he's obviously doing something right. But yeah, I still stick with my guns that he need to bring in some young blood before the World Cup.
What I will say is Ireland have a great success record in the Men's Six Nations, less so
Mm,
in World Cup campaigns, which is my
mm.
hope with England because England are the opposite. And I think
Yeah.
I would rather England win a World Cup than win the Men's Six Nations, but I'd rather them win
Yeah.
all of them. But beggars
Yeah.
can't be choosers, can they? Anyway, on to a team of a country who have very much beggars can't be choosers is Scotland. They get third, which is their best positioning in a while, though there was the carrot being dangled at one point off the trophy. But again, their bogey team is Ireland. So everyone has a bit of a bogey team in the Six Nations. And I think that's what makes it so exciting, particularly for just for rugby fans in general, whether you're a neutral or not. Gregor Townsend is safe in the position that he's in. But I do hold the opinion that the turnaround from the loss against Italy was player led because we've seen Townsend lead Scotland in plenty of campaigns and no hate to Townsend. I think where he took Scotland from where they were before he became head coach many years ago to where the team that they've become is great. But I do still hold the belief that it has been the players that have stopped the plateau from continuing. So they can be proud that they came third, but of course it's bittersweet because they felt they were so close, but so far from coming first or indeed second. I really hope Rory Darge has gotten some deserved praise because he's been a really great worker on the field. 74 successful tackles with a 97.4 successful tackle percentage rate. He had six jackals in this tournament and he had a great try in round five against Ireland. I think there is so much talent in the back row in within the Celtic nations or any of the players that are qualified to represent the British and Irish Lions. And I do think one day Rory Darge will be a British and Irish Lion. He's still quite young. I think he's 24, 25, so there's still plenty of time for him to do that. I just hope he gets a lot of recognition from this tournament because he did a really great job. And Sione Tuipulotu, you mentioned it previously on another podcast episode that he's really stepped up as captain, and I also share that opinion.
I think he had a great season and I really enjoyed seeing him as a captain for Scotland. I think he did a really good job and I think he has grown into the role of being a captain so well. At the start of the Men's Six Nations, we thought, Gregor Townsend, like, his days are numbered and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
know what else. I mean, his job's safe now, for sure. I would deem this as a successful campaign for Scotland. I do think, as you've mentioned, they do have their bogey teams.
They
Ireland
do.
is that for them. Even though I did predict that Ireland will win, I was really, really hoping for an upset and that Scotland will actually go on to win the Men's Six Nations. I would still deem this as a successful campaign for them. They
Yeah,
beat England, they beat France, which are, it's two major teams, and France are very much an upward curve. And, we are a bit unsure of kind of where England is, but still for Scotland to beat England, like that's massive. I think something else that I've learned about Scotland is how strong they are at Murrayfield and at home. Something else that I've learned is that I really want to go and watch rugby at Murrayfield because
welcome
it
anytime. I
it
I
just
love
looks
Murrayfield.
like, yeah, it just looks insane. The vibes are insane. It sounds
Mm,
like, all the singing and everything. It's just, yeah, it seems incredible. So something that has been confirmed is that I definitely want to watch rugby at Murrayfield.
absolutely. I think you should do a tour of all of them, of all of
Yeah.
the UK bit national stadiums, because the vibes are all very different. Like when you go to
Mm.
Twickenham, it when you hear Sweet Chariot, the swing low,
Oh,
swing high,
yeah.
but in full voice, it does feel very English, and it does get you do get goosebumps. The Principality is like a party. And to me, that kind of
Oh,
summarizes Cardiff as a place because when you step out of the Principality, you basically got like a whole street of bars and stuff, like
oh
nice
wow.
restaurants and stuff. So it
Interesting.
feels like, yeah, we're all there, even though I do
Mm,
also kind of associate the Scots with being very vibrant as well and also liking a good
mm.
party, particularly on the West Coast. From my experience of having lived in Glasgow,
Yeah.
I've been to Murrayfield a couple of times because I used to get tickets through working through the SRU, and they do a cracking job of making men's international match days absolutely stellar. Flower of Scotland, when you hear it
Ah,
live and
yeah.
you're in that stadium, it is absolutely fabulous. And it it is one of my favorite stadiums. Don't come at me if you're also English in the comments and saying why, but it is. I just think from a rugby
Yeah.
lover's point of view, it's also not difficult to get to in Edinburgh either, as Twickenham for a lot of people, unless you live kind of in that area, it's not the easiest stadium to get to. It's like the
Mm.
Principality and Murrayfield are a lot easier to access. So yes, absolutely, we'll have to get it planned and do her side of the Ruck takes on Scottish Gas
Yeah.
Murrayfield.
Yes, please.
I think one final thing that I will also say is when Scotland's on fire, it's because of Finn as well. And
Yeah.
I don't want to think of what would happen if Finn Russell did have a long-term injury. I do think Tom
Mm.
Jordan is fantastic. And when he came off the bench in several matches, he had a huge impact. I do rate Adam Hastings as well at fly half. He's transitioning from Glasgow Warriors back to France. And I don't know if that will affect selection. I don't think it will because like Blair Kinghorn plays in France and he gets selected for Scotland. But I just think Finn is will always be the first choice 10 if he's fit now. And it'd be interesting to see if in the future, whether he when he decides to retire or if he does encounter a long-term injury, how Scotland would adapt their game plan, particularly in the management of the back line. Because I think Finn is excellent at scoring tries, setting up tries, seeing space, and being opportunist with kicks and territory. Italia, the Italians, their campaign may have ended in disappointment. However, there are so many positives for them as a squad. Fourth, if I recall, that is one of their highest positionings in the Six Nations. They beat England for the first time. They beat Scotland again, also in horrific conditions. They put together more kind of cohesive, wholehearted performances than I've seen them before. And I think how they performed against the Springboks in the summer gave us a flash of what they could bring to the Men's Six Nations. I also thought their autumn campaign set them up quite positively going into this. Like some wins, some losses, some good try score, but also a lot of learnings coming in. And for a team like Italy, they're probably the only team in the past 5 years that have been on a steady upward climb. Every other team seems to have gone through like loads of ups and downs. Wales and England being the two big ones for me. Wales is in like a huge decline and then a gradual improvement. England, where it's been 2024 was difficult to be an England rugby fan. 2025 was great. 2026 has been difficult to be an England rugby fan again. So it's like this
Mm.
back and forth. The other teams like Ireland always step up in the Six Nations. France were defending champions and on to win back to back. And we know with Scotland that they can either bring it out the bag or they don't.
Mm.
And I think that was also the case for the competition this year. But with Italy, this is a really exciting squad. And I think when they had a couple of really nice attacking phases, they were drilled really well and they were executed fabulously. Menoncello has been awesome. I've really enjoyed watching him play as well as Louis Liner. I think Italy had a fantastic offload game. Monte Ilioni had 11 offloads, which was second to Matthew Jalabert. Italy have got some really good things on their side, but I still think where they need to improve is the emotional game management because you're coming off the high of beating England and you play really quite poorly in the first 40 minutes against Wales.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the story for. I feel like Italy reminds me a lot of Argentina in that sense. Like
Yeah,
they'll go on to beat like a very strong team, so either England or New Zealand, and then the next match they'll go on to lose against a team like Wales or
mm,
a team that you wouldn't really expect them to lose against. So you kind of expect them to build from that win. But then they do the opposite. And I think that's just like part of, you know, their culture and, you know, the Italians as well as Argentinians. So I
yeah,
think that's definitely something that they can work on. But I think it's been a successful campaign for Italy.
yes,
Finishing fourth, you're ranked higher than England, which is, I think it's a massive,
mm,
win for Italy. But yeah, I think also Italy's squad is kind of settling at the minute. I know they had a few injuries here and there, which does make it difficult, but I think they are building very well. And it is matches like that that you do need to win.
yeah,
Matches against England. If you go on to lose matches like that, that would be far worse than actually going on to win the match and then losing the week thereafter. So
mm,
I think Italy can still be very proud of themselves and proud of their campaign. I think what you said about them going like this consistently is also very true. Over the last, I feel like 2 years, Italy has improved
mm,
so much. And we even saw it, we saw it in the autumn internationals, but we even saw it last year when they toured to South Africa. It was in the June, July, it was in the incoming tour. They played at Loftus, and Italy was, you could see they were frustrating South Africa at times, and we
yeah,
didn't really expect Italy to come out guns blazing like that. So, yeah, I think Italy is no longer the team that you should underestimate, and I don't think teams are underestimating them anymore. But it's good to see that they're gaining that respect in international rugby. And what I also enjoy is that you can't really predict, okay, yeah, it's just going to be the four stronger teams ranked 1 to 4, and then Italy and Wales at the bottom,
yeah.
which I really like because it means that Italy is becoming competitive.
Totally agree with you. A great campaign for Italy. For the fifth team, not so great a campaign. My country, England. Obviously, to my dismay, they didn't front up in the ways that I thought they would. However, we ended on a much more fruitful performance, despite the scoreline.
Mhm.
And the fact that they were able to make that quick turnaround, as I mentioned at the top of the show, it fills me with a bit more hope. But it did feel like we were transported back to 2024 with some of the mistakes and the lack of execution of skill. And they almost, if they were like a wave, they started on this big high and then it was like
Mm.
quite low. And then it went even lower like at low tide almost. And then it was hopes were lifted a bit, but it was a bit edgy. And let's say the waves were a bit rocky and the surfer was falling off when he was trying to get up again, and then kind of fell flat again
Mm,
after the loss against Italy. And then they somehow surged and bounced back. But obviously, you can't ignore the disappointment of how they played. That's going to hit home really for a lot of those players and probably the coaching staff too. But I still think there's hope. I think if England didn't front up, it would make me very concerned going into the Nations Cup. However, I
mm,
think England showed some really good stuff. I was really impressed with Marcus Smith's attitude, particularly in the game against France, because I think England rugby had built Marcus Smith up to be the PR star. Of course, because he plays this very
mm.
vibrant style of rugby. He's got awesome hair and um, he's quite fashionable as well. And
Yeah.
he plays this very fun, fast, flary game with his club Harlequins. And that's kind of Quinns' style of play. And when he brought that to England rugby, he was lifted up as the poster boy. And this is the thing that English media does. It lifts people up and then it attempts to tear them down in many respects. And I do think
Mm,
Smith maybe became a victim to that. And sometimes maybe his selection did fall in line with the fact that Harlequins haven't been performing as well in the Gallagher Prem, but for some reason they're performing really well in the Investec Champions Cup. So I think I was really impressed with how Marcus Smith stepped up to the plate, and despite the wider criticism, he performed really well and injected the energy that England needed in that game. I think Tommy Freeman is absolutely fabulous in attack. I still think there needs to be a decision on how he's going to be utilised as a centre if he definitely wants to make that switch from 14 to 13. The future is bright in the second row and the back row with Ollie Chesham and Alex Coles. They both had incredible games against France. And the East Midlands pair, Alex Coles from Northampton Saints and Ollie Chesham at Leicester Tigers, I think going forward, that's really exciting. It's not the tournament I wanted as an England supporter, but glimpses of hope. Your thoughts on England?
Yeah, I think obviously not the campaign that we were hoping for. And I think you summed it up pretty well. I do think, however, even though it wasn't a good campaign for England, I do believe that the last game against France came at the right time.
Yeah.
And I also believe that hopefully that gives them the confidence going into the Nations Cup, or just the confidence, for them to rebuild and kind of get everything together before the start of the Nations Cup. I know England did not have a successful campaign, but I still don't think there's reason to panic. And it might sound crazy to
Mm,
England fans. I don't know. There are also some fans that might, say that Borthwick needs to, lose his job or whatever. I think give it, the whole Nations Cup, see how it goes, see if they can regroup and rebuild from this
mm.
and take it from there. I think there were glimpses of England rugby that we saw in the autumn internationals and previous matches. I know it's not going to make anything better for you or for other England fans. Being ranked fifth is not a nice feeling, and I think especially having such high expectations going into the main Six Nations. But yeah, I don't believe there's reason to panic. I do believe there's still hope, and I think the way that England finished off the tournament, even though they didn't win the match against France, I think was still very positive, and I really like their attacking style of play. And hopefully, if they can work with that, and it can come off, I think England can have success with it.
I just hope that they keep that attacking style of play because that was the most
Yeah.
excited I've been in terms of watching England out
Mm,
of not Wales, but Wales weren't particularly competitive in round one. Out of the other four games, how they played against France was the most inspiring style of rugby. Now, I don't know what changed
mm,
internally, but something clearly changed that week. And may that change continue. Of course, with a few tweaks like discipline,
mm,
8 yellow cards or something across the campaign. Like, that was really poor.
mm.
But if they can continue
Yeah.
playing an inspiring style of rugby, there is definitely hope. And I'm not feeling dismayed, though, when I came off watching that Italy game, I definitely was. It's water under the bridge. There's always next year. And another team who's probably thinking there's always next year is Wales, who get the wooden spoon. But I think it's kind again another bittersweet feeling, almost on a high because their performance against Italy was great. Like I was stunned with how awesome
Hmm.
they were, and I was also a bit surprised in how Italy didn't really fire any shots in the first 40 minutes. Their discipline was awful in the first round, and we said after in our review episode after round one, Wales need to improve on their discipline. It needs to be these baby steps. And it seems like, is anyone at the WRU watching her side of the ruck? I don't know, because it seems like they have taken baby steps. And
Hmm.
it's been nice to see them improve under Tandy. And I really like Steve Tandy. And I just hope he stays for a long time because whatever he's doing, I think he's having success with making progress with the team. Their confidence improved, their game plan improved. I still think they need to figure out where Louis Samet sits within the back three. Is he going to be used as a winger? Is he going to be used as a fullback? I still think
Hmm.
that hasn't been nailed down since he's returned from the NFL back into rugby. Aaron Wainwright and Dewey Lake have been very impressive throughout the entire campaign, and no one's going to take the international shirt off of them, and they're going to make their clubs very proud when they return to them. I also think Dan Edwards is shaping out to be a really nice fly half. Now, right now, if you put him in front of a head to head compared to some of the other fly halves in the competition, I don't think he would win. But the way that he played in that final game really stood out to me, and that he's really grown into the shirt. His composure was great. I thought his kicking was good. I thought how he moved the ball around the field was also excellent. And I've seen an improvement in his game from start of the competition till the end. So I think we'll see even more progress with more time under Tandy, and hopefully that will mean that the competitions or the fixtures, sorry, in the Nations Cup will be incredibly competitive, and that's a win for rugby.
100% agree with you. And I think Wales were in such a weird spot, like were and on such a weird spot. Like it felt to me like all of their players retired at the same time. Like they had the squad for
Well, they
like the
did.
longest time, which was,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was, set players that played week in and week out, and Wales were very good. And then all of the players retired. They got a new head coach, Steve Tandy, so obviously a new coach, new game plan, and Wales were used to Warren Gatland for so long. Now there's a new head coach. A lot of players get injured, a lot of new players have to come in. So I think we kind of underestimate how much changes Wales have undergone in the last like 2, 3 years. And
Mm.
that's kind of when things started to go downhill for them. And I think this was like the first match in like 13 or 17 matches. I can't remember the exact number now, that they have won in the Six Nations.
Yeah.
So it's insane. But yeah, I think this win against Italy was so very needed for them. And I think they were knocking on the door the whole tournament.
Yes.
Um, to actually get the win against Scotland. And, they didn't play bad rugby against Ireland. It's just a few things that didn't really go their way, and a few mistakes that they'll have to look at, schoolboy errors and things like that. But I
Yeah.
do think they improved a lot. And I think the last match was also just as for England. They ended their campaign on a high, and even though they won the wooden spoon, I think this is a step in the right direction for them. And I think Steve Tandy kind of, he can breathe again, because I
Yeah.
think he was really holding his breath the whole tournament and just for the last few matches. But yeah, I think Wales just need some time to settle. As you've mentioned, Louis Samet, just to figure out kind of who fits and where.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think Steve Tandy is doing a good job. And what we've also seen is in Wales's campaign is that it's not due to a lack of trying. They've been trying week in and week out. So I am happy that they got the win. At times I was so frustrated on their behalf because I was just like, no, I can't even imagine what they must feel like coming
Yeah.
so close, but yet so far. So yeah, I think it's a win for Wales. I wouldn't say it's a successful campaign for them, but I do think that they've improved a lot, and I'm excited to see where their rugby will go over the next few seasons and just the next few matches at least.
Absolutely. And the final performance from Wales, it reignited the passion in the Welsh supporters. And I think that was something that Welsh rugby lovers were really struggling with in the last few years. And it seems like there has been a shift in the narrative in a positive direction. And that is a win for rugby, even if you don't like the Welsh. But that's your opinion if you hold that
Yeah.
anyway. It's just good to see a tournament that is competitive and unpredictable, because for
Yeah.
so many years prior, it was a predictable tournament, as you already mentioned earlier in the show, about it would be a toss between who would get in the top four out of the England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, and then it would be Italy and Wales at the bottom. And that's not the case anymore. And going forward, that makes commercially the competition incredibly exciting. But it brings us to an end of the Men's Six Nations for 2026. That is us wrapping up our coverage on this competition.
Mm.
But do not fear, because we will be back discussing the URC. We also have the Investec Champions Cup knockout stages knocking at the door very, very soon. Plus, the Women's Six Nations also happening. And will the Red Roses hold on to the title? They are the World Cup champions. This is the first time that they're regathering. And for me, as an England fan, go on the girls. Like, it's so good that one of the teams is securing
Yeah.
trophies left, right, and centre. But I know there'll be plenty of other teams that will also be knocking at the door, vying for that top spot. So we'll be covering all of those different competitions here on Her Side of the Ruck. But that's it. We've all we've got time for now. Thank you so much for joining us and watching another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. So I'm Tash, and I'm going to sign off from the UK.
I'm Bernice, and I'll be signing off from SA.
See you next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.